The lawyer's office smelled like mahogany and desperation, and Kylie Summers was drowning in both as she stared at the contract that would either save her family or destroy what remained of her dignity. "Miss Summers, I need your decision today," the attorney said, sliding the papers closer across the polished desk. "Mr. Harrison has been more than generous with his offer." Generous. That was one word for it. Kylie read the terms again, though she had memorized them during her sleepless night. 1 year of marriage to Ethan Harrison, owner of Harrison Maritime Industries, in exchange for $3 million. Half paid upfront, half upon completion of the agreement. No physical intimacy required. Separate living arrangements acceptable. A clean divorce after 12 months with no strings attached. $3 million would save her father's restaurant, pay off the medical bills from her mother's cancer treatments, and give her younger brother a chance to finish college. $3 million in exchange for pretending to be someone's wife for a year. "I'll sign," Kylie said, picking up the pen before she could change her mind. The attorney nodded, unsurprised, and began preparing the documents. "Mr. Harrison will meet you at the courthouse tomorrow at 10. The ceremony will be brief and private." Kylie signed her name on 4 different pages, each stroke of the pen feeling like she was writing away a piece of herself. When it was done, the attorney handed her an envelope containing a cashier's check for $1.5 million. "Welcome to the family, Mrs. Harrison," he said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. She drove straight to the bank, then to the hospital where the billing department had been hounding her family for months. By 5 that evening, her mother's debt was cleared, and Kylie had transferred enough money to her father's account to save the restaurant from foreclosure. She kept just enough for rent and basic expenses, refusing to spend Ethan Harrison's money on herself beyond what was absolutely necessary. Her best friend Melissa called that night, her voice sharp with concern. "Are you insane? You're marrying a complete stranger for money." "I'm marrying him for my family," Kylie corrected, packing a small suitcase. The contract required her to maintain a residence that could reasonably be called their marital home, though Ethan had assured her through his attorney that he traveled frequently and would rarely be there. "You don't even know what he looks like," Melissa protested. That was not entirely true. Kylie had done her research. Ethan Harrison, 32 years old, had built his shipping empire from a single cargo vessel inherited from his grandfather into a fleet that dominated East Coast maritime trade. He was notoriously private, rarely photographed, and according to the limited information available online, completely uninterested in the social scene that usually accompanied that kind of wealth. The few photos she found showed a tall man with dark hair and strong features, always in a suit, never smiling. He looked exactly like what he was, a businessman who had no time for anything that didn't contribute to his bottom line. "He needs a wife for some business reason," Kylie said. "I need money. It's a transaction." "Marriages shouldn't be transactions," Melissa said softly. "Tell that to every society wedding in history," Kylie replied, though her friend's words stung because they were true. The courthouse was nearly empty when Kylie arrived the next morning, wearing the only dress nice enough for a wedding, even a fake one. It was pale blue, simple, and she had owned it since college. Her hands shook as she climbed the steps, and she almost turned around 3 times. Then she thought of her mother's face when Kylie had told her the medical bills were paid. The way her father had cried with relief. Her brother's excited call about staying in school. She could do this. It was just a year. Ethan Harrison was waiting in the hallway outside the clerk's office, and Kylie's breath caught despite herself. The photos had not done him justice. He was taller than she expected, easily over 6 feet, with broad shoulders that filled out his charcoal suit perfectly. His dark hair was slightly too long, as if he couldn't be bothered with regular haircuts, and his eyes were an unusual shade of gray that seemed to look straight through her. "Miss Summers," he said, extending his hand. His voice was deep, professional, with no warmth in it. "Mr. Harrison," she replied, shaking his hand. His grip was firm but brief. "Shall we?" He gestured toward the office, and Kylie nodded, not trusting her voice. The ceremony took less than 10 minutes. A board clerk recited the legal requirements while Ethan and Kylie stood side by side, not touching except when required to exchange simple gold bands that the attorney provided. When the clerk pronounced them married, there was no kiss, no celebration, just Ethan's quiet "thank you for doing this" as they signed the marriage certificate. "The address of the apartment is in your packet," Ethan said once they were back in the hallway. "I've had your name added to the lease and given you full access. I'll be traveling to Singapore next week for a month, possibly longer." "What should I tell people?" Kylie asked. "About us, I mean." "The truth, within reason. We married quickly. We're private people." "That should satisfy most curiosity." He checked his watch, a gesture she would come to recognize as his signal that a conversation was ending. "I need to get back to the office. The car outside will take you to the apartment." He left before she could respond, his footsteps echoing down the marble hallway until he disappeared around a corner. Kylie stood there, a married woman, feeling more alone than she had in her entire life. The apartment was in a building she had only ever walked past, the kind of place with a doorman who wore white gloves and knew everyone's name by heart. Her new name, apparently, because he greeted her as Mrs. Harrison with a respect that made her uncomfortable. The apartment itself was beautiful and sterile. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the harbor, hardwood floors gleamed in the afternoon light, and the furniture looked expensive and unused. There were 2 bedrooms, both with en-suite bathrooms, separated by a spacious living area, and a kitchen that had probably never seen a home-cooked meal. Kylie chose the smaller bedroom and unpacked her single suitcase, her modest belongings looking ridiculous in the enormous closet. She spent the rest of the day wandering the apartment, trying to feel like anything other than an intruder. That night, she called her father at the restaurant. "How is everything?" "Kylie, sweetheart, I don't know how to thank you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "The contractors came today. We're going to make it." "Good," she said, fighting tears. "That's good, Dad. Where are you staying? You said you had to move." She looked around the luxury apartment at the view that probably cost more per month than her father made in a year. Just a new place. Closer to work. The lie tasted bitter, but the contract had been clear. Her family could not know the truth. Ethan's reputation depended on people believing this was a real marriage, and she had agreed to maintain that fiction. Work was her job at Morrison Gallery, where she had been an assistant curator for 3 years. It paid barely enough to survive in the city, but she loved it. Art had always been her passion, even when it seemed impractical compared to her family's more immediate needs. Her boss, Catherine Morrison, was a sharp-eyed woman in her 60s who missed nothing. When Kylie returned to work on Monday, Catherine noticed the ring immediately. "That's new," she said, raising an eyebrow. "I got married," Kylie said, the words still feeling foreign. "To whom?" "His name is Ethan. He works in shipping." All true, technically. Catherine studied her for a long moment. "Are you happy?" The question caught Kylie off guard. "I'm fine," she said, which was not an answer but was all she could manage. The first month passed in a strange limbo. Ethan was in Singapore, as promised, and then Hong Kong, and then somewhere else. He sent brief emails about his schedule, asked if the apartment was satisfactory, and transferred money to an account for household expenses that Kylie barely touched. She continued working at the gallery, came home to the too-quiet apartment, and tried not to think about the 11 months still remaining on their agreement. Then, 6 weeks into their arrangement, Ethan came home. Kylie was in the kitchen attempting to make dinner when she heard the door open. She had not expected him, and the shock of seeing him in the flesh again made her drop the wooden spoon she was holding. "Sorry," Ethan said, setting down his bag. "I should have called ahead." "It's your home," Kylie said, bending to retrieve the spoon. "You don't need permission." He looked tired, she noticed. His suit was wrinkled, unusual for him, and there were dark circles under his eyes. "I have meetings here for the next 2 weeks. I'll try to stay out of your way." "You don't have to do that," Kylie said before she could stop herself. "It's a big apartment." He nodded slowly, his eyes moving to the stove where she had been attempting to cook pasta. "Are you making dinner?" "Trying to. I'm not great at it, but it's better than takeout every night." She hesitated. "There's enough for 2 if you want." Ethan looked surprised, as if the offer had not occurred to him as a possibility. "I don't want to impose." "You're not. You're my husband." The word still felt strange, but less strange than it had 6 weeks ago. "Sit down. It'll be ready in 10 minutes." He did, after a moment's hesitation, removing his jacket and rolling up his sleeves. Kylie tried not to notice the way the gesture revealed strong forearms, or how much more relaxed he looked without the armor of his formal clothes. Dinner was awkward but not unbearable. Ethan asked about her work, and Kylie found herself talking about an upcoming exhibition she was helping organize. He listened attentively, asking intelligent questions, and she was struck by how different he seemed from the cold businessman at the courthouse. "What about you?" she asked. "How's the shipping business?" "Complicated," he said with a slight smile that transformed his face. "We're negotiating a new contract with a supplier in Taiwan. They want terms we can't meet. It's a mess. Will you figure it out?" "I always do," he said, but he sounded tired rather than confident. They cleaned up together, moving around the kitchen in careful orbits, and then Ethan excused himself to his bedroom. Kylie lay awake in her own room for a long time that night, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of someone else in the apartment, and wondering why his presence made her feel less alone rather than more uncomfortable. Over the next 2 weeks, they fell into an unexpected routine. Ethan left early for his office and returned late, but they had dinner together most nights. Kylie cooked, or attempted to, and Ethan proved surprisingly helpful in the kitchen, admitting that he had learned the basics during college when he was building his business and had no money for restaurants. "I lived on pasta and canned sauce for 2 years, he told her one night, chopping vegetables with practiced efficiency. "This is gourmet by comparison." "It's really not," Kylie said, laughing as she stirred a sauce that was definitely too thin. "It's better than eating alone," Ethan said quietly, and something in his voice made Kylie look up. He was watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read, something almost vulnerable. "Yeah," she agreed softly. "It is." They started talking about more than just surface topics. Ethan told her about growing up with a grandfather who believed in hard work and nothing else, about building his company from one cargo ship into a fleet, about the loneliness of being responsible for hundreds of employees' livelihoods. Kylie told him about her family, about watching her mother fight cancer and her father struggle to keep his restaurant alive, about choosing art history over something practical, because she couldn't imagine doing anything else. "Why did you need a wife?" Kylie asked one night, emboldened by wine and the comfortable darkness of the apartment. "Really?" Ethan was quiet for a long time. "My grandfather left me controlling interest in the company on the condition that I be married by 33. He thought I worked too much, that I needed someone to care about beyond balance sheets. He was probably right. He turned his glass in his hands. But I didn't want to marry someone who wanted me for my money or my name. I wanted it to be honest in its own way. A clear agreement between two people who knew exactly what they were getting. And after the year, Kylie asked, "You'll be free," Ethan said. "With enough money to do whatever you want. Paint if that's what makes you happy. Open your own gallery, whatever you choose." It was generous, more than generous, but something about it made Kylie sad. "What about you? What will you do?" "Keep working," he said with a shrug. "It's what I'm good at." "That sounds lonely." "It's what I know," Ethan said, and Kylie heard a lifetime of isolation in those 4 words. The 2 weeks turned into 3 when Ethan's Singapore trip was delayed. He seemed in no hurry to leave, and Kylie found herself hoping he would stay. She liked having him around, liked the way he listened when she talked about art, the way he could make her laugh with dry observations about his business rivals, the way the apartment felt like a home instead of a beautiful prison when he was there. She was falling for him. The realization hit her one morning as she watched him read the newspaper at breakfast, his hair still damp from the shower, his expression focused and serious until he noticed her watching and his face softened into a smile. "What?" he asked. "Nothing," she said, panic rising in her chest. "Just thinking." This was not part of the deal. She was supposed to take his money, play her part, and walk away. She was not supposed to care that he worked too hard, or that he seemed surprised every time she did something kind, or that his rare smiles made her heart race. She definitely was not supposed to wonder what it would be like if this were real. Ethan left for Chicago the next day, and the apartment felt emptier than it had before he had started staying there. Kylie threw herself into work, spending long hours at the gallery preparing for the exhibition. She told herself it was dedication to her job and not avoidance of an apartment that reminded her of a man she could not have. Catherine noticed, of course. "You look miserable," she said bluntly one afternoon. "Trouble in paradise." "There's no paradise," Kylie said. "It's complicated." "Marriage usually is," Catherine said. "But if he makes you this unhappy, why stay?" "He doesn't make me unhappy," Kylie said quietly. "That's the problem." Catherine studied her with knowing eyes. "Oh, sweetheart, you fell for him." Kylie did not deny it. She could not. "Does he feel the same way?" Catherine asked. "I don't know. I don't think so. It's not that kind of marriage." The words hurt to say out loud. "Maybe you should find out," Catherine suggested gently, but Kylie knew she could not. The contract was clear. 1 year, no complications, a clean break. Ethan had designed it that way for a reason. He had wanted honesty, an arrangement without messy emotions. She had agreed to those terms. Telling him how she felt would only make the remaining months unbearable and probably make him regret ever approaching her with the offer. Ethan returned from Chicago, then left for Boston, then New York. Their dinners together became less frequent, and when they did see each other, something had shifted. Ethan seemed distracted, distant, and Kylie wondered if he had somehow sensed her feelings and was pulling away. 3 months into the marriage, Ethan's sister showed up at the apartment unannounced. Kylie had heard about Elizabeth Harrison but never met her. She was 30, stunning in the effortless way of people born to wealth, and she looked at Kylie with frank curiosity. "So you're the woman who finally got my brother to settle down," Elizabeth said, walking into the apartment as if she owned it. "I had to see for myself." "I'm Kylie," she said, feeling inadequate in her work clothes next to Elizabeth's designer outfit. "I know who you are. What I want to know is why." Elizabeth sat on the couch and gestured for Kylie to join her. "Ethan has never been interested in marriage. Half the eligible women in the city have thrown themselves at him. Then suddenly he announces he's married to someone no one's ever heard of. It doesn't add up." Maybe he wanted privacy, Kylie said carefully. My brother wants control, Elizabeth corrected. Everything in his life is planned, managed, optimized. So either you're the most spontaneous thing that's ever happened to him, or there's something else going on. Kylie said nothing, unsure how to respond without breaking the terms of the contract. Elizabeth's expression softened. Look, I'm not trying to give you a hard time. I'm worried about him. Ethan's been alone for so long. I want him to be happy. I want to know if you make him happy. I don't know, Kylie admitted. I think he married me for business reasons. His grandfather's will, Elizabeth said, nodding. I figured that was part of it. The old man was obsessed with family legacy. But here's the thing about my brother. He doesn't do anything halfway. If he married you, even for practical reasons, it means something. We barely know each other, Kylie said. Then get to know him, Elizabeth said simply. Ethan's terrible at letting people in, but he's worth the effort. Trust me. After Elizabeth left, Kylie sat in the quiet apartment and thought about what she had said. Could there be more to Ethan's distance than just the practical arrangement they had agreed to? Or was she reading hope into a situation that was exactly what it appeared to be? That night, Ethan came home earlier than usual and found Kylie on the couch with a book. Your sister stopped by today, Kylie said. Ethan's expression shifted to something like alarm. What did she say? That you're terrible at letting people in. Kylie set down her book. She's worried about you. Elizabeth worries too much, Ethan said, but he sat down next to Kylie instead of retreating to his room. You have anyone? Kylie asked. Friends, I mean, people you talk to. I have colleagues, business associates. He was quiet for a moment. I had friends once in college, but when you're building something, there's no time for maintaining relationships. People drifted away, I let them. That sounds lonely. It's efficient, Ethan said, but there was no conviction in his voice. What about now? Kylie asked. Is it still efficient? Ethan turned to look at her, and the intensity in his gray eyes made her breath catch. No, he said quietly. Now it just feels empty. They were sitting closer than Kylie had realized, close enough that she could see the faint scar above his left eyebrow, close enough that when Ethan reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, she felt the warmth of his hand linger against her cheek. Kylie, he said, his voice rough. This arrangement we have, is it enough for you? Her heart was pounding. What do you mean? I mean that I can't stop thinking about you. I mean that I leave on business trips and all I want is to come home. I mean that somewhere in the last 3 months, this stopped being a transaction and became something real, at least for me. His hand was still on her face, his thumb tracing her jawline. Tell me I'm not alone in this. You're not alone, Kylie whispered. I thought you wanted distance. I thought I was just a business arrangement. You were supposed to be, Ethan said, leaning closer. But nothing about you is what I expected. He kissed her then, and it was nothing like the polite, empty ceremony at the courthouse. This was real and desperate and full of 3 months of unspoken longing. Kylie kissed him back, her hands tangling in his hair, and when they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Ethan rested his forehead against hers. I want to do this right, he said. I want to court you properly, take you to dinner, earn this instead of buying it. You already have it, Kylie said, but she was smiling. But I wouldn't say no to dinner. They started over in a way, except now they were starting from a place of honesty. Ethan took her to dinner at restaurants where the waiters knew him by name, and Kylie learned that he had a dry sense of humor and strong opinions about wine that made her laugh. She took him to art galleries and museums, and he surprised her with his knowledge and insight, admitting that he had minored in art history before business consumed his life. I almost went a different direction, he told her one afternoon at a photography exhibition. My grandfather thought it was a waste of time. Maybe he was right. Maybe he was wrong, Kylie said. Maybe it's not too late. They spent evenings cooking together, which usually ended in laughter as one of them inevitably messed up a recipe. They talked late into the night about everything and nothing, making up for the years they had been alone. And slowly, carefully, they built something real out of the fake foundation they had started with. Ethan told her about the pressure of living up to his grandfather's legacy, about the fear that he was nothing beyond his company, about the loneliness that had become so normal he had stopped recognizing it as pain. Kylie told him about the guilt of pursuing art while her family struggled, about the weight of being the one everyone depended on, about the fear that she had sold herself for their comfort. "You saved them," Ethan said firmly when she voiced that fear. "There's no shame in that." "I married a stranger for money," Kylie said. "That's pretty much the definition of shameful." "You married someone who's grateful every day that you said yes," Ethan corrected. "Someone who's falling in love with you." Kylie's breath caught. They were in the kitchen, and Ethan had flour on his shirt from their attempt at making bread. It was such an ordinary moment for such extraordinary words. "Falling?" she asked softly. "Not already there. Already fell," Ethan admitted, setting down the dough he had been kneading. "Probably around the second week when you burned dinner and ordered pizza without apologizing. You were just yourself, unapologetically. I'd never met anyone like that." "I love you too," Kylie said, and saying it out loud felt like freedom. "I tried not to. I thought it would make everything harder." "And does it?" Ethan asked, pulling her close. "No," she said, wrapping her arms around him. "It makes everything make sense." They made love that night, and it was different from the careful distance they had maintained before. This was real and vulnerable and perfect. Afterward, lying in Ethan's bed with his arms around her, Kylie felt like she had finally come home, but reality intruded as it always does. 4 months into their marriage, Ethan's business partner Marcus arrived from London with news that required Ethan's immediate attention. "We're having problems with the Taiwan contract," Marcus explained over coffee in the apartment. He was a friendly man in his 40s who looked at Kylie with warm approval. "The supplier is threatening to pull out entirely. If that happens, we lose our biggest shipping route." "How long would you need to be there?" Kylie asked Ethan. "At least a month, maybe 2, he said, his expression troubled. "I don't want to leave you that long." "It's your company," Kylie said, even though the thought of 2 months without him made her chest tight. "You have to go." "Come with me," Ethan said suddenly. "Take a leave from the gallery." "Come to Taiwan." "I can't just leave my job," Kylie protested, but the hope in Ethan's eyes made her want to say yes. "Sure you can," Marcus said cheerfully. "Young love and all that, I'm sure your boss would understand." Kylie thought about Catherine, about the exhibition they were planning, about her responsibilities. Then she thought about 2 months without Ethan, about the life they were building together, about the fact that for once she could choose what she wanted instead of what everyone needed. "Okay," she said. "I'll come." Catherine was more understanding than Kylie expected. "Go," she said firmly. "The exhibition will be here when you get back. But trust me, sweetheart, you don't get many chances at real love. Take this one." Taiwan was humid and chaotic and beautiful. Kylie fell in love with the night markets and the temples, the way the city moved at a frantic pace that somehow felt peaceful. Ethan worked long hours negotiating contracts, but they had evenings and weekends together, exploring the island like tourists. "I never do this," Ethan admitted one Saturday as they hiked through a national park. "Take time off, I mean. Travel for pleasure instead of business." "How does it feel?" Kylie asked, watching him take in the view with something like wonder on his face. "Like I've been missing out," he said, reaching for her hand. "Thank you for reminding me there's more to life than work. Thank you for showing me I deserve more than just surviving," Kylie replied. The contract negotiations were difficult. The supplier was angry about terms, and Ethan spent hours in tense meetings trying to find a compromise. Kylie watched him come home exhausted night after night, saw the stress taking its toll, and wished she could help. Then one night, inspiration struck. She had been looking at contemporary art galleries in Taipei and noticed that several featured maritime themes. Taiwan's relationship with the ocean was central to its culture and economy. What if that was the angle they needed? What if you framed the shipping contract as a cultural partnership, not just a business deal? Kylie suggested over dinner. Taiwan has such a strong maritime tradition. Position your company as respecting and honoring that, as wanting to be part of preserving it. Ethan looked at her thoughtfully. That's actually brilliant. Instead of just talking about profit margins and delivery schedules, talk about shared values and long-term collaboration. He tried the approach in the next meeting, and while it did not solve everything immediately, it shifted the tone. The supplier became more willing to listen, more open to compromise. 2 weeks later, they reached an agreement that satisfied both sides. "You saved this deal," Marcus told Kylie at the celebration dinner. "That cultural partnership angle changed everything." "Kylie sees things differently than I do," Ethan said, looking at her with open admiration. "She reminds me that business is about people, not just numbers." "You should hire her," Marcus joked. "Best consultant we've ever had." But Ethan was not joking when he brought it up later that night. "Marcus is right. You have an eye for this. The way you understand culture, art, human connection, that's what I'm missing in my approach." "What if you actually did consult for the company? Use your art history background to help us understand the cultural contexts we're working in." "I'm not a business person," Kylie protested. "Exactly," Ethan said. "That's why you'd be valuable. I have plenty of business people." "I need someone who thinks differently." Kylie considered it. The idea was appealing in a way she had not expected. "Let me think about it," she said. They stayed in Taiwan for another 3 weeks until the contract was fully finalized. By the time they flew home, Kylie had made her decision. She would consult for Harrison Maritime on a project basis, focusing on cultural research and relationship building. It would give her flexibility to continue working at the gallery while exploring this new path. "Are you sure?" Catherine asked when Kylie explained. "You worked hard for your position here." "I know," Kylie said, "but this feels right. Like I'm using my skills in a new way, and if it doesn't work, I can always come back to this full time." Catherine smiled. "You've changed, you seem happier, more confident." "I feel like myself," Kylie said, realizing it was true. "Maybe for the first time." Back home, life settled into a new rhythm. Kylie worked 3 days a week at the gallery and 2 days at Harrison Maritime's offices, where she quickly proved her worth by helping secure a contract with a Greek shipping family, by understanding and respecting their traditions. Ethan's employees were surprised by her presence at first, but she won them over with genuine interest in their work and insights that made their jobs easier. But the best part was coming home to Ethan every night. They had moved all of Kylie's belongings into the master bedroom, transforming it from a sterile space into something that reflected both of them. They cooked dinner together, talked about their days, made love, and held each other through the night. The apartment became a real home. 6 months into their marriage, Ethan's attorney called with a reminder about the contract terms. "Just checking in about the timeline," he said. "The 1-year mark is in 6 months. We'll need to start preparing the paperwork if you're planning to proceed with the dissolution." Kylie's blood went cold. She had been so caught up in the reality of their relationship that she had almost forgotten about the contract, about the fact that this was supposed to end. Ethan's face was unreadable when she told him about the call. "What do you want to do?" he asked. "What do you want?" Kylie countered, afraid to speak first. "I want to tear up that contract," Ethan said firmly. "I want to marry you again, properly this time. I want to spend the rest of my life with you, but I need to know that's what you want too, not what the contract obligates you to do." Relief flooded through Kylie. "I want to stay," she said. "I want this to be real." "It has been real," Ethan said, pulling her close. "From the moment you burned that first dinner and made me laugh, maybe even before that, but I want everyone to know it's real. I want to have a real wedding with our families there. I want to start a life that isn't based on an agreement but on choice." They called the attorney the next day and voided the contract. Kylie returned the second half of the payment, refusing to keep money for something that had become real love. Ethan tried to argue, but she was firm. "I didn't stay for the money," she said. "I stayed for you. That has to matter." "It does," Ethan said softly. "It matters more than you know." They told their families the truth over a dinner that was equal parts awkward and cathartic. Elizabeth laughed so hard she cried. "I knew it," she said. "I knew there was something going on, but this is even better than I imagined." Kylie's parents were shocked but ultimately supportive. Her father pulled her aside, his eyes serious. "Are you happy?" he asked. "Really happy, not just okay, really happy," Kylie assured him. "I love him, Dad, and he loves me." "Then that's all that matters," her father said, hugging her tight. They planned a real wedding for the 1-year anniversary of their courthouse ceremony. This time, Kylie wore a dress she chose herself, white silk that made her feel beautiful. Ethan wore a tuxedo and could not stop looking at her like she was the most precious thing in the world. Their vows were different this time. Ethan spoke about finding unexpected love in a practical arrangement, about learning that the best things in life cannot be controlled or planned. Kylie spoke about taking a risk that changed her life, about discovering that love could be both a choice and a surprise. When the officiant pronounced them married, and Ethan kissed her, it felt like a beginning instead of an ending. The reception was at her father's restaurant, which had been beautifully restored. Kylie's mother, now in remission, cried happy tears. Her brother gave an embarrassing speech about how uptight Kylie used to be and how Ethan had loosened her up. Elizabeth gave a speech about how Ethan had finally found someone who could tolerate his workaholic tendencies. "To Kylie and Ethan," Marcus said, raising his glass, "who proved that sometimes the best love stories start with a contract and end with a choice." That night, in the apartment that was fully theirs now, Ethan gave Kylie a wedding present. It was a set of keys. "What are these for?" she asked. "A building downtown," Ethan said. "It's empty right now, but it has good bones. I thought maybe you could turn it into that gallery you've always wanted. Your own space, your own vision." Kylie stared at him, overwhelmed. "Ethan, I can't accept this. It's too much." "It's not enough," Ethan said seriously. "You saved my family's restaurant, paid for your mother's treatment, gave your brother a future. You brought me back to life. This is just a building. What you'll do with it, that's the real gift." "We'll do," Kylie corrected. "Together." They spent the next year transforming the space into the Summers Harrison Gallery, a name that reflected both of them. Kylie curated exhibitions that focused on emerging artists, giving them the opportunities she wished she had when she was starting out. Ethan helped with the business side, teaching her about contracts and finances, learning from her about art and taking risks on beauty instead of just profit. The gallery opened to critical acclaim. Catherine came to the opening and hugged Kylie tight. "I'm so proud of you," she said. "You found your path." "I found more than that," Kylie said, watching Ethan charm a group of collectors while genuinely appreciating the art they were discussing. "I found home." 2 years into their real marriage, Kylie discovered she was pregnant. They had talked about children in an abstract way, but the reality of it was both terrifying and thrilling. "We're going to be terrible at this," Kylie said, staring at the pregnancy test. "Probably," Ethan agreed, but he was grinning. "But we'll figure it out together." Their daughter was born on a spring morning, tiny and perfect and demanding. They named her Grace, after Ethan's grandmother who had died when he was young. She had Ethan's gray eyes and Kylie's wild hair, and she wrapped them both around her tiny finger from the first moment. Ethan, who had once thought he was too busy for relationships, proved to be an attentive father. He learned to change diapers and warm bottles, took paternity leave that scandalized his business partners, and spent hours just holding Grace while she slept. "I didn't know I could feel like this," he admitted one night, watching Grace sleep in her bassinet. "Like my heart is walking around outside my body." "Welcome to parenthood," Kylie said, leaning against him. "Terrifying, isn't it?" "The best kind of terrifying," Ethan said. Life was not perfect. Ethan still worked too much sometimes, and Kylie struggled to balance the gallery with motherhood. They had arguments about schedules and responsibilities, about whose career should take priority when conflicts arose. But they worked through it, learning to communicate and compromise, remembering that they were on the same team. 3 years after Grace was born, they had a son. They named him Daniel, and he was as calm as his sister was energetic. Their family felt complete in a way neither Kylie nor Ethan had known they were missing. The gallery thrived. Kylie's eye for talent brought attention from collectors and critics, and several artists she had championed went on to major success. Ethan's business continued to grow, but he was more selective now about which opportunities to pursue, prioritizing time with family over endless expansion. On their 5th anniversary, they returned to the courthouse where they had first married. It looked exactly the same, institutional and cold, but it meant something different now. "I can't believe we stood here and promised a year," Kylie said, holding Ethan's hand. "It seems insane now." "Best insane decision I ever made," Ethan said. "Though I think we can agree it worked out differently than planned." "You thought you were hiring a wife," Kylie teased. "You got a partner, a consultant, and a gallery curator." "I got everything," Ethan corrected, turning to face her fully. "I got a life I didn't even know I wanted. I got to fall in love instead of just going through the motions. I got you." "We saved each other," Kylie said, standing on her toes to kiss him. "I came here desperate and alone. You gave me hope." "You gave me a reason to have hope," Ethan said. "Everything good in my life started the day you signed that contract." They went home to their children, to the apartment that had become a real home filled with toys and laughter and proof of the life they had built. Grace wanted to hear the story of how Mommy and Daddy met, a story they had carefully edited for young ears. "You got married twice?" Grace asked, confused. "Once for practical reasons," Ethan explained. "And once because we couldn't imagine being apart." "Which one counts?" Daniel asked. Kylie and Ethan looked at each other and smiled. "Both," Kylie said. "They both count." That night, after the children were asleep, Ethan and Kylie sat on the couch watching the city lights. It had been 7 years since that first day in the courthouse, 7 years since Kylie had signed away a year of her life for money to save her family. "You ever regret it?" Ethan asked quietly. "The way we started?" "Never," Kylie said without hesitation. "Maybe we took an unconventional path, but it got us here. I wouldn't change that." "I used to think love was a distraction," Ethan admitted. "Something that would get in the way of building something successful. I had it backwards." "What do you mean?" "Love is what makes success matter," Ethan said simply. "All the money, all the business achievements, they didn't mean anything until I had someone to share them with. Until I had you and Grace and Daniel. That's when I finally understood what my grandfather was trying to tell me. That you needed to be married, Kylie asked. That I needed to be alive, Ethan corrected. Really alive, not just going through the motions. He knew I was building a successful company but an empty life. He wanted more for me. You think he'd be happy with how things turned out? Kylie asked. I think he'd be happy I'm happy, Ethan said, though he'd probably say I told you so. Years passed and their life continued to evolve. The gallery expanded to a second location. Harrison Maritime opened new shipping routes. Grace started school and showed an early talent for art that made Kylie's heart swell. Daniel proved to have his father's head for numbers but his mother's creative spirit. Kylie's mother remained healthy, celebrating each year of remission as a gift. Her father's restaurant became a neighborhood institution, successful beyond his modest dreams. Her brother graduated college and became a teacher, crediting Kylie with giving him the chance to pursue his passion. Elizabeth married a doctor she met at a charity event and had twins. Marcus retired and moved to Portugal, sending postcards about the simple life. Catherine closed the Morrison Gallery but came out of retirement to advise at Kylie's gallery, mentoring young curators the way she had once mentored Kylie. On their 10th anniversary, Ethan took Kylie back to Taiwan. They stayed at the same hotel where they had fallen deeper in love, visited the temples and markets that had been the backdrop to their first real trip together. I was so scared then, Kylie admitted as they watched the sunset from a rooftop restaurant. Scared that you'd realize I wasn't worth the investment, that I was just some girl who married you for money. You were never just anything, Ethan said. You were brave and selfless and real. You were everything I needed, even though I didn't know I needed it. We were both broken in our own ways, Kylie reflected. You were alone by choice, I was desperate, and somehow we fixed each other. We built something new, Ethan said. Not fixed, built, from the ground up, starting with that ridiculous contract. They laughed about it now, about the formal language and specific terms, about the way they had tried to make something messy and human into something clean and contractual. You still have it? Kylie asked. The original contract, in my desk drawer, Ethan admitted. I keep it as a reminder. Of what? That the best things in life can't be planned, he said. That sometimes you have to take a risk on something unexpected, that love finds you when you're not looking for it. Back home, life continued its beautiful, ordinary rhythm. School plays and business meetings, gallery openings and family dinners, mundane moments and spectacular memories, all woven together into a life that was deeply, perfectly theirs. Kylie still worked at the gallery, though she had hired a manager to handle day-to-day operations. She focused on discovering new talent and building relationships with artists, using the skills she had developed consulting for Ethan's business. She was working on a book about contemporary art and cultural context, drawing on her experiences helping Harrison Maritime navigate international relationships. Ethan had stepped back from daily operations at the company, promoting talented executives and focusing on strategic direction. He spent more time with the family, coached Grace's soccer team despite knowing nothing about soccer, and took up painting as a hobby after years of Kylie encouraging him to reconnect with his art history roots. I'm terrible at this, he said one Saturday afternoon, staring at his canvas in frustration. You're learning, Kylie corrected, looking over his shoulder. And besides, it's not about being good, it's about the joy of creating something. Is this what you feel when you look at art? Ethan asked. This sense of possibility? Yes, Kylie said softly. That's exactly it. Grace was 12 now, thoughtful and artistic with her mother's eye for beauty and her father's determination. Daniel was 9, clever and kind with an endless curiosity about how things worked. They were good kids, happy kids growing up in a home full of love and security. "Mom," Grace asked one night at dinner, "how did you know Dad was the one?" Kylie and Ethan exchanged glances, the real story still their secret. The kids knew the basics, that their parents had married quickly and fallen in love after, but not the full truth. "I knew when I realized I was happier with him than without him," Kylie said carefully, "when being together felt like home." "But how long did that take?" Grace pressed. "Not as long as you'd think," Ethan said, reaching for Kylie's hand across the table. "Sometimes you just know." Later, after the kids were in bed, Ethan pulled Kylie close. "Should we tell them the whole truth someday, when they're older?" Kylie said. "When they can understand that sometimes the right thing happens for complicated reasons." "You think they'll judge us?" Ethan asked. "I think they'll see two people who took a risk that changed their lives," Kylie said. "And I think they'll understand that love doesn't always follow a straight path." On their 15th anniversary, they renewed their vows again, this time on a beach at sunset with their children as witnesses. They had done the courthouse wedding, the formal ceremony with family, and now this, intimate and perfect. "15 years ago I was desperate," Kylie said, her voice carrying over the sound of the waves. "I made a choice that seemed crazy. I married a stranger for money. But somewhere in that transaction, I found the love of my life. I found my partner, my best friend, the father of my children. I found home. And I would make that same crazy choice 1,000 times over if it led me back to you." 15 years ago, I thought I had it all figured out," Ethan said. "I had a plan for my life, and it didn't include love or family or any of this messiness. I thought I was hiring a wife to satisfy a contractual obligation. Instead, I found the person who showed me how to actually live, who taught me that success without love is just noise, who gave me everything I didn't know I was missing. You saved me, Kylie. Every single day you saved me." They kissed as the sun set behind them, their children cheering, and it felt like the perfect circle. They had started with a contract and built a life. They had started as strangers and become soulmates. They had started with a transaction and created a love story. That night, in their hotel room while the kids slept in the adjoining suite, Kylie thought about the woman she had been 15 years ago. Desperate, scared, willing to sell a year of her life to save her family. That woman would not have believed this was possible, that a contract marriage could become real love, that a stranger could become her everything. "What are you thinking about?" Ethan asked, pulling her closer. "How far we've come," Kylie said. "How a single desperate decision changed everything." "The best decision either of us ever made," Ethan said firmly. "I came to that courthouse expecting a business transaction," Kylie said. "A year of pretending in exchange for money. I was so focused on the practical aspects that I never considered what might actually happen." "What did happen?" Ethan asked, even though he knew, even though they had lived it together. "I fell in love," Kylie said simply, "with a man who was just as lonely as I was desperate. With someone who saw me not as a solution to a problem but as a person worth knowing. You gave me more than money, Ethan. You gave me a life I didn't know I could have." "You gave me a life period," Ethan said. "Before you, I was just existing, working, achieving, accumulating, but I wasn't living. You taught me the difference." They made love with the windows open, the sound of the ocean a gentle backdrop, and afterward they held each other and talked until dawn. About their children's futures, about the gallery's next exhibition, about retirement plans that seemed both distant and suddenly closer than expected. About the life they had built from the strangest of beginnings. The years continued to be kind to them. Grace went to art school and developed her own distinctive style, surrealist paintings, that combined her parents' influences in unexpected ways. Daniel studied engineering, but with an emphasis on sustainable design, bringing together logic and creativity. They were finding their own paths, and Kylie and Ethan watched with pride and occasional terror at how quickly time was moving. Kylie published her book to critical acclaim and began teaching courses on art and cultural context at a local university. Ethan finally stepped down as CEO of Harrison Maritime, handing the company to a trusted successor and taking on an advisory role. They had more time together, time to travel and explore and simply be. "We should go back to that courthouse," Kylie said one morning. "Take a picture there now with the kids." "Why?" Ethan asked, though he was smiling. "Because that's where it all started," Kylie said. "And I want Grace and Daniel to understand that sometimes the best things come from the most unlikely places." They took the photo on a Saturday afternoon, the four of them standing on the steps of the courthouse where Kylie and Ethan had married 20 years earlier. Grace and Daniel made silly faces despite being teenagers, and Kylie and Ethan held each other and laughed. "This is where you got married?" Daniel asked, looking at the plain building with confusion. "It's so boring." "It was just a formality," Ethan explained. "We had a real wedding later." "But this one counted too," Kylie added, "because this is where we made a choice that changed everything." That night, they finally told their children the whole truth. About the contract, about the money, about the arrangement that was supposed to last 1 year and instead became a lifetime. Grace and Daniel listened with wide eyes, processing the information. "So you basically hired Mom?" Grace asked Ethan. "In a way," Ethan admitted, "though it was more complicated than that." "And you married him for money?" Daniel asked Kylie, not quite judging but not quite understanding. "I married him to save our family," Kylie said carefully. "Your grandparents were in trouble. The restaurant, Grandma's medical bills, your uncle's school, I was desperate, and your father offered a solution. But you fell in love," Grace said, seeing the bigger picture. "We did," Kylie confirmed. "It wasn't supposed to happen, it wasn't part of the plan. But it did, and it was the best unexpected thing that ever happened to either of us." "Do you think it would have worked if you hadn't fallen in love?" Daniel asked, his analytical mind working through the scenario. "No," Ethan said firmly. "Without love, it would have been exactly what it looked like on paper. A transaction, empty and ultimately meaningless. But because we did fall in love, because we chose each other every day after that first choice, it became something real." "That's actually kind of romantic," Grace said, surprising them, "in a weird way. Like you took a practical situation and made it into true love." "We got lucky," Kylie said. "Very lucky. It could have gone differently. But it didn't," Daniel pointed out. "You made it work." "We did," Ethan agreed, pulling Kylie close. "And we'd do it again." The revelation did not change anything between them. If anything, Grace and Daniel seemed to understand their parents better, to appreciate the depth of the commitment they had made to each other. It became a family story, strange and unique, and entirely theirs. 25 years after that first courthouse wedding, Kylie and Ethan stood in the apartment where they had first learned to be a real couple. They were older now, gray threading through their hair, lines earned from laughter and life marking their faces. But the love between them was as strong as ever, deeper for having weathered years of ordinary challenges and extraordinary joys. "Do you remember the first night you came home and I was making dinner?" Kylie asked, looking around the kitchen that had seen so many meals and conversations. "You dropped the spoon," Ethan said, smiling at the memory. "You were so surprised to see me." "I was terrified," Kylie admitted. "I thought we'd barely have to see each other, that I'd just be playing a role, and then there you were in the flesh, and I didn't know how to act." "You asked me to stay for dinner," Ethan said. "That was the moment everything changed, when you treated me like a person instead of an obligation." You were never an obligation, Kylie said. Even then, even when I was confused and scared, you were never that. They had lived a full life together, built careers, raised children, created a home filled with love and laughter. They had survived arguments and illness, celebrated triumphs and mourned losses, grown together instead of apart. The contract that started it all was long forgotten, replaced by a commitment deeper than any legal document could capture. If you could go back, Ethan asked, a question he had posed before but never tired of hearing the answer to, would you still sign? Every time, Kylie said without hesitation. I'd sign it every single time. Even knowing how hard some of it would be, Ethan pressed. The sleepless nights with babies, the business struggles, the times we fought and hurt each other. Especially knowing that, Kylie said. Because I also know how we got through it, together, always together. Grace had her first gallery show that spring, a stunning collection of paintings that earned rave reviews. Kylie stood in the gallery she had built, watching her daughter shine, and felt the completion of a circle she had not known she was drawing. She had come into the art world desperate and uncertain. Now her daughter was thriving in it, confident and talented. You did this, Ethan whispered, standing beside her. You built this space, this opportunity, for her and for so many others. We did this, Kylie corrected. You gave me the means, I just had the vision. You had everything, Ethan said. I just got lucky enough to see it. Daniel graduated with honors and accepted a position at a firm focused on sustainable urban development. He was going to help design cities that worked with nature instead of against it, bringing art and engineering together in ways that made both his parents proud. You raised amazing humans, Catherine said at Daniel's graduation party. She was elderly now, but her eyes were still sharp. I always knew you would. I was terrified, Kylie admitted. I had no idea what I was doing. No one does, Catherine said with a laugh. But you led with love, that's all that matters. On their 30th anniversary, Ethan surprised Kylie with a trip back to Taiwan. They stayed at the same hotel, visited the same temples and markets, retraced the steps of those early days when they were still figuring out how to be together. I was so in love with you already, Kylie said as they watched the sunset from the same rooftop restaurant. And so terrified you'd figure out I wasn't sophisticated enough for your world. My world was empty before you, Ethan said. You brought color and warmth and life to it. You were never not enough. You were everything. They were in their 50s now, thinking about grandchildren and what retirement might actually look like, about the legacy they wanted to leave beyond businesses and galleries. They talked about writing their story down, about sharing it so others might understand that love can come from the most unexpected places. You think people would believe it? Kylie asked. That a marriage of convenience actually became real love? Does it matter if they believe it? Ethan countered. We know the truth. We lived it. I want people to know that it's possible, Kylie said, to take something practical and make it beautiful, to start from a place of necessity and end up with everything you never knew you needed. They started writing that year, sitting together in the evenings, reconstructing the story of how a desperate woman and a lonely millionaire found each other through a contract and built a life through choice. It was harder than expected, reliving those early days of uncertainty and fear. But it was also healing, seeing how far they had come. Grace got married when she was 28, to a kind man who loved her art and understood her moods. Kylie and Ethan watched their daughter marry for love. No contract or convenience, just pure simple commitment, and felt grateful that they had given their children that option. Daniel brought home a girlfriend who was smart and funny and perfect for him. They talked about moving to another city for her career, and Daniel was excited rather than resentful, understanding that partnerships meant supporting each other's dreams. They learned from us, Ethan said, watching their children navigate their own relationships with grace and confidence. The good parts, anyway. They learned that love is a choice, Kylie said, that you wake up every day and choose each other. That's the real secret. Their book was published on their 32nd anniversary, a slim volume that told their story with honesty and heart. It found an audience among people looking for hope, for proof that unconventional beginnings could lead to beautiful endings. Kylie and Ethan did interviews and book signings, and everywhere they went, people wanted to know the secret. "How did you make it work?" they asked. "How did a marriage of convenience become real love?" "We were honest," Kylie would say, "about what we wanted, what we needed, what we were feeling. We were patient," Ethan would add. "We didn't rush it. We let it unfold naturally. And we were lucky," they would both say. So incredibly lucky. But luck was only part of it. The truth was that they had worked for their love, fought for it, chosen it every single day for over 3 decades. They had built something real from a foundation of convenience, and that took more than luck. It took courage and commitment, and a willingness to be vulnerable. Grace had her first child when Kylie and Ethan were 55, a little girl they named Catherine after Kylie's mentor. Holding her granddaughter for the first time, Kylie thought about that desperate woman in the lawyer's office, signing away a year of her life. That woman could never have imagined this, could never have dreamed that her practical decision would lead to such abundance of love. "Thank you," she whispered to Ethan that night as they left the hospital, "for taking a chance on me." "Thank you for saying yes," Ethan replied, "for being brave enough to walk into that lawyer's office, for being desperate enough to consider my insane offer, for being open enough to let it become real." They were grandparents now, entering a new phase of life. Ethan was fully retired, spending his days painting and volunteering and spoiling his granddaughter. Kylie had stepped back from the gallery, though she still advised and consulted. They traveled when they wanted, hosted family dinners every Sunday, and spent quiet evenings reading or talking or simply being together. "This is what I was afraid of," Ethan admitted one night. "When I was building the company, when I was alone. I was afraid that if I stopped working, there would be nothing, that I had built a successful business but an empty life." "And now," Kylie asked, though she knew the answer. "Now I know that the business was just the framework," Ethan said. "You're the life, you and Grace and Daniel and Catherine. You're what matters. Everything else was just noise." Daniel got engaged that year, and his fiancée asked Kylie for advice about marriage. "Don't go into it with rules and expectations," Kylie said. "Go into it with an open heart and a willingness to be surprised." "The marriage I thought I was getting into was nothing like the one I ended up with, and that was the best surprise of my life." "Do you ever wish it had been more traditional?" she asked. "That you dated first, fallen in love naturally?" "We did fall in love naturally," Kylie said firmly. "It just happened after the wedding instead of before. And honestly, I think that made us stronger. We had to choose each other consciously. We had to work for it. Nothing was assumed or taken for granted." On their 35th anniversary, Kylie and Ethan gathered their family at the restaurant that had started it all. Kylie's father had passed away 2 years earlier, but her mother was there, healthy and happy at 80. The restaurant was run by Kylie's brother now, thriving and beloved in the community. "I want to make a toast," Ethan said, standing with his glass raised. 35 years ago, Kylie walked into a lawyer's office and made the bravest decision of her life. She agreed to marry a stranger to save her family. I walked into that same office thinking I was making a business transaction. We were both wrong about what we were doing. We were actually finding each other. It hasn't always been easy," Kylie added, standing beside him. We've had fights and challenges and moments where we had to remember why we chose this. But every single day, I've been grateful for that contract. Not because of what it said, but because of what it led to. It led me to the love of my life." Grace and Daniel raised their glasses, understanding now the depth of what their parents had built. Little Catherine was asleep in her mother's arms, the newest generation of a family that had almost been lost to debt and desperation. "To unlikely beginnings," Grace said. "And beautiful endings," Daniel added. "To love that grows," Kylie said. "And choices that matter," Ethan finished. They drank and laughed and celebrated the family they had built from the strangest of starts. And later, when the party was over and they were alone in their apartment, Kylie and Ethan stood at the window looking out at the city that had witnessed their entire journey. "You remember what you said to me?" Kylie asked. "That first night you came home and I made dinner." "I said it was better than eating alone," Ethan recalled. "You said it before that," Kylie prompted, "when I asked you to stay." Ethan thought back, searching through the years. "I said I didn't want to impose. And I said you weren't imposing, that you were my husband." Kylie turned to face him. "That was the first time I said it out loud, the first time I acknowledged what we were to each other, even if it wasn't real yet." "It was already real," Ethan said softly. "We just didn't know it yet." "Maybe," Kylie agreed. "Or maybe we made it real by treating it that way, by acting as if it mattered, even when it was just a contract. We spoke it into being." "We loved it into being," Ethan corrected, pulling her close. "And we'll keep loving it into being for as long as we have." They were 60 now, thinking about mortality and legacy and all the things that come with age. But they were also still in love, still choosing each other, still grateful for the contract that had brought them together and the life they had built beyond it. Their story had become legend in their family. Grace told Catherine about the grandmother who had been brave enough to marry a stranger, and the grandfather who had been smart enough to fall in love with her. Daniel told his fiancée about his parents' unconventional start and conventional ending, proof that love could come from anywhere if you were open to it. Kylie's gallery had launched dozens of careers. Ethan's company still thrived under new leadership. Their children were happy and successful. Their granddaughter was healthy and loved. Everything that had seemed impossible on that desperate day in the lawyer's office had come to pass, not because of the contract, but because of what came after. "I wonder what would have happened," Kylie mused one evening, "if I had said no. If I had walked away from the offer." "You would have found another way," Ethan said confidently. "You're too strong to give up." "And you?" Kylie asked. "What would you have done?" "Found someone else to marry for the contract," Ethan admitted, "and lived the empty life I had resigned myself to. I wouldn't have known what I was missing, but I would have been missing everything." "We saved each other," Kylie said, not for the first time, but always meaning it. "We did," Ethan agreed, "and we keep saving each other, every day." They lived into their 70s, watching Grace's art career flourish and Daniel's designs change skylines. They welcomed more grandchildren, each one a miracle and a blessing. They wrote a second book about sustaining love over decades, about choosing partnership even when it would be easier to drift apart. And through it all, they remembered that first day in the courthouse. The nervous woman in a simple dress, the guarded man in an expensive suit. The contract that promised a year and delivered a lifetime. "It was always meant to be you," Ethan told Kylie on their 50th anniversary, surrounded by children and grandchildren and the life they had built. "Even when I didn't know what I needed, it was you." "It was always meant to be us," Kylie corrected. Two broken people who found each other in the most improbable way and built something whole. They renewed their vows one final time, not in a courthouse or on a beach or in a church, but in their living room with their family as witnesses. They spoke the same words they had spoken so many times before, but they meant something different now. They were not a promise of what might be, but a celebration of what was. Their love story became the kind that people told at weddings and anniversaries, proof that sometimes the best things come from the most unlikely places. That a contract can become a commitment, that convenience can become choice, that a transaction can transform into the truest love. Kylie never regretted signing that contract. Ethan never regretted offering it. And together, they proved that love doesn't care how it starts. It only cares how you choose to let it grow.